Boom, back in color without the live part for another edition of the Bottom Line Podcast. I believe this is episode number 63. Been a few months. However, the year of 2020 will bring good tidings without the Christmas being left behind. For those of you who are not aware, I am Davidson Baker. I am the host of the rendition of this podcast, MMA coverage for Fansided and My MMA News, as well as a couple of other industries and proprietors. However, we're not here to talk about face punching today. My good man that's going to help me out on this network for going forward has joined me. His name is Travis Sanders, my man. Go ahead and let the fine people how you're doing on this Tuesday afternoon.
Yo, what's going on, guys? I'm excited to be a part of this. Me and Davidson had met back when he was in Toledo, and we kind of chopped it up and got the opportunity to kind of talk football, and hopefully we can get something going here.
That is the plan, my man. We got some big things popping, little things stopping, going forward. And you know, it's kind of the thick of the football of the winter football frenzy per se, without Super Bowl week and its, you know, kind of enshrinement kind of hanging over it. But regardless, January and February are two of the most repetitive news cycle months for the NFL for obvious reasons. And coming into this weekend, there were 4 head coaching vacancies in the NFL. And we're going to get to the wildcard games, obviously, but the big news before we get into the other head coaching vacancies, obviously coming down yesterday. When I woke up, there were 4 head coaching vacancies. I think I went to take a whiz and came back in the room, and all of a sudden there were 3. Mike McCarthy hired in Dallas. Trav, your reaction to that news?
I tell you what, I was a little bit surprised in the sense that when you look at the struggles that the Cowboys had this year, it's pretty obvious they struggled defensively more than anything. You know, I think if I remember correctly, they ranked in the top 5 or 7 offensively. So it wasn't like they weren't putting points up. And you know, a lot of times, you know, people will say, "Oh, well, they weren't playing tough opponents. You know, they played in the NFC East," and so that, you know, that margin point differential could be a little misleading. But I think defensively is where they struggled. And, you know, when you look at Mike McCarthy, the way I've always viewed Mike McCarthy was he's offensive minded, but he's also a little conservative. And so when I think of what the Cowboys need and what kind of fit them, I was just a little surprised. To be quite honest with you, I think Mike McCarthy and Jason Garrett are very similar. Now, am I saying that Mike McCarthy won't do a good job? No, but I was a little surprised by it.
I really liked the hire for a couple of reasons, and I just to ask you from your standpoint, the conservative comment that you made here, because I like that comment because it helps kind of debunk this myth that people have going around about what's going to happen in Dallas with Mike McCarthy, and that's that he's not going to run the ball. Yeah. And people would make that assumption by simply looking at the fact that I believe I saw the stat somewhere else. I should have written it down, but it was somewhere around, I think like every single year that he was in Green Bay, they were at 23rd or lower in the NFL in rushing attempts, not even rushing yards, not yards per carry, actual rushing attempts. However, anybody that follows football like you and I do should know at this point, or that saw Peter King's incredible interview with McCarthy a couple of weeks ago, that he has spent the last year, like he turned his house into like an NFL war zone compound. And and all of like half of his coaching staff have been watching tape on every team in the NFL. I'm sure that was a major selling point to Jerry in terms of coaxing him in on their little sleepover they had down at the ranch.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, as you and I both know, and like you said, anybody that kind of watches football understands, if you are coaching the Dallas Cowboys and you have a running back who you just paid, you made the highest paid running back in the league, and Zeke Elliott, you got to feed him the ball, you know, and you know, obviously they're starting to, you know, get to a point where they're getting ready to, you know, have to pay Dak and Amari Cooper. And so it's not like these guys don't have weapons. You know, they got weapons offensively, but I just think that I think that they need to. I think that they really need to obviously run the ball. I think they need to, like I said, I think they need to take shots down the field and use even like Michael Gallup. Like Michael Gallup is their number 2 guy, but Michael Gallup could be a number 1 guy in a lot of places. I think, and that's just me personally. But yeah, I just think that their offense, is good, but I think it could be a lot better. And I don't necessarily think Mike McCarthy is the best fit. That's just
Randall Cobb too. Now, kind of lining up at that wide receiver 3 spot. You know that he'll have positive things to say about McCarthy after all those years they spent in Dallas together. Bringing in Mike Nolan to help the coaching staff. I read today. I'm not sure if this has been made official yet, but I did read today that he's interested and or leaning towards bringing Kellen Moore back. It's a big burden on your shoulders to be the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. And now that McCarthy is in that seat for 5 years, I mean, the NFC East as a whole, and we'll get into it, like obviously the Redskins and Giants hires after we kind of touch on these games over the past weekend. But the NFC East is a brand new ball game at this point. Everyone except Peterson is now new to the party. And I think that helps Dallas in a weird kind of ish way. What your last thoughts about that before we move on to last weekend's game?
I think you're right, honestly. And the reason I say that is I honestly don't think that the Eagles are getting any better, to be quite honest with you. And so realistically, the Giants have some young talent and some bright spots. But even with them having a new coach, I don't think that they get much better to the point where they're competing for the division. And obviously the Redskins have a ways to go. So realistically, I think that now like I said before, I don't necessarily think Mike McCarthy is the best fit, but I do think the Cowboys are probably the best team in that division right now.
Seems that way, at least on paper, but it feels like we've been saying this for quite some time at this point.
Right.
I digress. We move on to this past weekend where obviously now we've kind of allowed a little bit of time for the dust to settle. So we're going to go in order of games played, starting with, it seems like at least at this point, every single year, it's just become mid-January tradition or early January tradition rather for the Houston Texans to be on the Saturday slot in the afternoon on ESPN, whatever that means. Regardless of that, they ousted the Buffalo Bills in emphatic and exciting fashion. Maybe not so emphatic, but emphatic in how exciting it was. And, Michael Jordan or Deshaun Watson having his own little Michael Jordan moment. It seemed like they had their feet on Buffalo's throats and just kind of lay their foot off the gas. Your thoughts on that matchup?
I thought it was a good game. Obviously, it was a great start to the playoffs. It brought some excitement. I'll tell you what, though. First of all, I love Deshaun Watson. I think he's already one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the league. And again, that might be a stretch, but I think he's already a top 5 quarterback in the league. But what I will say is that I don't think that they are a contender right this second. And the reason I say that is because as good as the Bills' defense is, the Bills' offense is it's not very good. And, there's a lot of things that you could point to. I think Devin Singletary is a great young back that's going to be good for years in the league. I think Josh Allen still struggles at times. And realistically, they have one receiver that I think is solid, and that's John Brown. Cole Beasley's an okay slot receiver, but he's been in the league for a while, and he's kind of just been, what you're going to get from Cole Beasley. But with that being said, I think the Texans defense struggles at times. And when you go down, what was it? What were they down? 16-0 or I don't know what they were down 16-0 at some point, 17-0. I don't know. They were down. They were shut out for a long time.
16-0, yeah.
Right, and then they went and scored, 19 straight or something like that. And so I think, like I said, I don't think that the Texans are ready to contend for a Super Bowl yet, but they definitely have some bright spots, and I enjoy watching them play for sure.
Yeah, and with Buffalo, it's a little It's a little testy when talking about Buffalo because you see, Brian Daboll's up for these head coaching jobs. The offensive coordinator in Buffalo, he spent time with the Belichick coaching tree, spent time with the Nick Saban coaching tree. Um, so you would have to imagine that at least with the pieces that they now continue to acquire, and I mean, I thought Dawson Knox had a nice year for them at tight end as well. But Cole Beasley, nice slot receiver at best, like you said, and John Brown has kind of had a breakout year. Singletary, good. Josh Allen. Let me just say this about Josh Allen. I like Josh Allen. I always have liked Josh Allen. He sold me on his NFL future in the bowl game of his senior year when the man had 7 attempts in the first half and 5 of them were touchdowns. Um, the first half, not the game, the first half, and I've always gone out on my shield saying I think Allen, being from Oklahoma, wearing the Thunder hat, have the bracelet and all. I really have said from day one that I believe Josh Allen will end up being the best quarterback in this class. It looks like Lamar is going to supersede that, at least for now. Regardless, he's got to be better, and he said it. He said it in his post game press conference. I think there are a lot of things you can build on with Josh Allen going forward. However, he's got to be better in those big moments, and his threat to run is formidable. But I think they need to use it a little bit more. I mean, what you say? What you say?
No, I agree 100%. Like I said, as much as I kind of was very critical of Josh Allen, this past Saturday, I do think there's a lot of things. That there's a lot of things that you can build on with him, and like you touched on, his athleticism is crazy. I went and saw him play the Steelers in Pittsburgh, and I saw him. I mean, he's a big guy. Like, he's not a little guy. And he moves well. So kind of touching on your point too, I think that if they use his size and his athletic ability and maybe some more designed runs, or maybe even him deciding, hey, let me run this one instead of trying to force it. I know he's got a big arm, but ultimately with you being a young quarterback, that's only going to open up stuff down the field. I think if he were to improvise a little bit more and pick up first downs with his legs, I mean, that's what you got to do to move the ball. Whatever you got to do to move the ball. And then to kind of go on his pieces outside of Josh Allen, I think, like you said, Dawson Knox did have a good rookie year. It's crazy. It's crazy. This is kind of off topic, but it's crazy to think that him, AJ Brown, and DK Metcalf were all on the same offense at one point.
I was just talking about this yesterday. Yeah, 100%. I mean, the fact, and I just watched a big thing on SB Nation the other day. I mean, those recruiting classes were just so dirty, and it really was. Yeah, but that is a good point. Go on.
Yeah, no. So yeah, to go back to what I was saying. I think the Bills have a lot of young bright spots that they can build on, and with Josh Allen being one of them. I think that, like you said, and some of it's not even like quarterback related. It's more just situational. It's like you can't run 20 yards back and lose yards that way. You know what I mean? Like, how he did in the playoff game. Like, you can't do things like that. Sometimes there's some errant throws that he has. But again, he also does make plays that you look at and you're like, there's only a few guys in the league that can make that play, and he happens to be one of them.
Bro, what about like the weird flip back?
Oh
what the hell was that?
Well, that's one of them. That's what we talk about. You can't. I mean, I understand what he was trying to do, but at the end of the day, you cannot do that.
No,
especially when you're that close to hit the ground. It'd been one thing if he was. Because he was held up for a second. If he would have pitched it then, which still would have it was unnecessary. But nonetheless, he waited until he almost hit the ground, and that could have potentially cost them. That could have not even given them a chance. So
absolutely. I thought, beginning the weekend and going from there on to, probably most of the way through the entire weekend, honestly, it was mostly a one-score game throughout all 4 of them. And now going forward into the nightcap on Saturday, as Mike Florio would say, the Terminator is dead. And Tom Brady and the Patriots have gone packing. I mean, we can talk about the game all we want, and I'm sure that I know we will. However, the big scope of things here, and obviously the Tennessee Titans deserve credit, and rightfully so. What is next in Foxborough? That's the big question on everyone's mind. What is going to happen going forward in Gilletteville?
I'll tell you what. Personally, I really don't think Tom Brady's going to be a Patriot next year. I think he is. I know he's not super active, with the media and stuff like that. He's going to tell you he's not going to screw up. He's going to tell you the things that are going to make him look like he's a good guy, and he is. He's got every right to say what he needs to say. But ultimately, I know he hears the criticism. He hears that, he can't do anymore. He's washed up, this and that and that and this. At the end of the day, if he goes somewhere and gets some weapons, he can still be a top quarterback in this league. And that's just my opinion. So truthfully, I wouldn't, and this could be a stretch, but I don't think that it is that far-fetched to think that he won't be in Foxborough next year.
I don't think it's far-fetched either. I think he's still, ability-wise, I think he's still a see how I'm having a hard time kind of characterizing it. I think he's still like in that upper tier. I'm not putting him in an elite tier. I'm not putting him, like close to there. Just because of the wear and tear and aging effect. However, at the end of the day, I think what you just said, at least in my opinion, your opinion is almost like I almost am with you on it, but saying that he goes somewhere and he has weapons, he's still a top quarterback in this league. I think largely that's more than likely to be the case. However, my concern would be kind of the Peyton Manning effect. Like Peyton Manning had all, Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders in their prime. He made Jordan Thomas look like Antonio Gates for a season. And then all of a sudden, bam, that his arm began to look like one of those inflatable things outside of car dealerships. That's got to happen at some point. And I know we've been waiting on it. I know people are saying that it's already coming happening. But here's what nobody's talking about. Nobody is talking about. Everyone's talking about Brady leaving. Who's to say Belichick didn't want to pick up and head out of town? Who's to say? I mean, well, now that there are jobs filled, it seems that that's not happening. But regardless, it seems like the narrative has just been so much Brady.
Yeah, no, it's interesting what you just said. I'm a little torn between this because part of me believes, and again, this could be far-fetched, but part of me believes that Tom Brady has mentally he doesn't want his success to be attached to Bill Belichick, and I think vice versa. I think Bill Belichick wants to prove to people he doesn't need Tom Brady to win. And again, I think Tom Brady's the same way. I don't need Bill to win. And again, maybe like you said, this could be something that if that were the case, and Tom was like, you know what, let me head out. Let me try to win with some weapons without Bill. But then if the Peyton Manning effect happens, and it's like, oh, well, did he wait too late, or was Bill that key to his success? So I think that there's definitely a few ways that you could kind of look at it. But ultimately, I hate to say it because I mean Tom Brady, as you know, I'm a Steelers fan. He's knocked us out for years, and he's destroyed us for years and years and years. I just think he's different. I think his ability to obviously read coverages and dissect a zone defense. I mean, because realistically, that's what defenses did this year. When they played Brady, they played man. They played man and bracket coverage on the top, and that was kind of what allowed defenses to be successful because they didn't really have those guys that could separate. But again, I think Brady is different. I think, like I said, his ability to read coverages and just his veteran presence with some weapons around him could be dangerous somewhere.
Absolutely. And what's weird is, we're going to get into Tennessee right now because obviously they won the game. My last thing I'll say about Belichick and company is Belichick, did you know Belichick's only drafted one Pro Bowl wide receiver or tight end in his entire career? It's Gronk. Nobody
Yeah.
else.
Yeah.
Nobody else.
Yep. That's a good point. Wow.
It is crazy to believe that. And maybe and I really like N'Keal Harry. I thought he had a solid second half of the year. But he's got to get a little bit better as well. I think he can. But man, Derrick Henry over under 35 carries on Saturday against Baltimore. They just feed this guy like he's Jabba the freaking Hutt.
Oh, it's unbelievable. I tell you what a lot of people have been asking what I think, and I'm not to get ahead of ourselves because I know they play the Ravens coming up, but a lot of people ask, hey, how do you think they're going to do against the Ravens? And again, this might be my bias because I can't stand the Ravens. But I think what the Tennessee Titans do have going for them is the simple fact that they can control the clock. They can run the ball at will. I mean, obviously, Derrick Henry's a huge part of that, but their ability to, because I mean, this is the way I look at it. If you can run the ball, I mean, I think against the Patriots, they had a 7-play, 75-yard drive, and they ran it every play. Or I'm sorry, they ran 6 of them, and they threw a screen to him one time or something. I don't know, but nonetheless, he touched the ball every single play, and he scored. And so when you can do that, I don't really care who you're playing. If you can do that, that's demoralizing for a defense. Obviously there's a fatigue factor. There's a lot of things that go into it. And so when you can control the clock like that, and not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but also Ryan Tannehill. I mean, Ryan Tannehill. So when you mix Derrick Henry running, and you got a drive that's 7 minutes long, and then you cap it off with, a 25-yard seam route to a tight end 2, it's like, well, then, goodness gracious, what do I do? Defensively, and that's against a good defense. So I think that do I think that they'll beat the Ravens? No, but I do think that it'll be a lot closer than what people expect.
I think they'll cover. They opened up at +10, and not gonna bang my drum as I just lied right there because I am gonna bang my drum. But I did go 4-0 against the spread this weekend.
There you go.
Pat myself on the back a little bit, but took the over in the Eagles game though, which was a big mistake. But regardless, there are a lot of things to like about this Titans-Ravens matchup on the side of the Titans because, they control the clock. Yeah, they run the ball. And, they play physical. These are all things that the Ravens do exceptionally well. You could honestly make an argument the Titans are the team that they did not want to see in this round. Yeah, like you really could. Like you said, though, do I think that the Titans are going to win the game? No. But do I think that they should be 10-point underdogs? I don't think that either. All right, let's go on to Sunday. Man, pour out for my boy D-Head, man. The New Orleans Saints just can't get a freaking break. They fall in overtime to the fighting Kirk Cousins, Kevin Stefanski's and company. And now the Saints not only find themselves 3 straight years without advancing in the playoffs due to a final play as either clock expired or in overtime. Now you have a situation where last year the obvious, blunder in the NFC title game, where you now have reviewing pass interference as something that exists in this league as a direct result of that play. And then you have another situation at the end of this game in the same building involving the same team. And it happens again to a degree, not as egregious as the Rams game, obviously. You revoked this rule for this reason, and you don't review it.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. Unbelievable. I tell you what, I think I saw a video of Shannon Sharp talking about it. It was funny because when you heard their explanation as to why they didn't review it. They gave this explanation. Again, I don't know exactly verbatim what it said, but they talked about how it was consistent as to what was called all year, but they never said it wasn't a pass interference. Now, do I think it was a pass interference? I do think it was a pass interference. Do I think that it was? Do I think it should have been called in that situation? I don't know. I really don't. And the reason why is because I don't think you reward a cornerback who does not play the ball in that situation. Because if you watch him, he doesn't play the ball. I mean, granted, Kyle Rudolph did push off, and it was obvious. But if you, and as a corner who's 6 inches shorter, I mean, really, your only chance in that situation is to play the ball. You can't either play the ball or play the catch on its way down. And obviously he didn't do either of those. So I think they should have reviewed it, but do I think it should have been called on the field? Probably not.
Probably not, and that's the key word is probably, because I mean I don't think you nor I are sold one certain way or the other, because both guys. I mean, and let's just be frank about this. Who knows what Al Riveron's job will be next year? But Al Riveron right now is in charge of the officials. And Al Riveron said over this past weekend that, you had both these guys kind of using their hands, and you had both of them kind of initiating contact. But you said it. He didn't play the ball, and Rudolph came down with the ball. Cousins made one heck of a throw. Vikings move on. And the Vikings controlled the clock, maybe not, to a Tennessee Titan degree. However, they controlled the clock and took advantage of situations where the Saints did not capitalize, and I think that was the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you talk about timely splash plays, and really, like, realistically, as much as it might have looked like Kirk. I mean, don't get me wrong, Kirk Cousins deserves a lot of credit, but there was a lot of timely passes or plays, I should say, that he was able to complete that were huge to the fact of or to them winning. And then obviously you got, Dalvin Cook, who's healthy now, and he's probably a top 5 back in the league when he's healthy. And so when you're giving him, X amount of touches a game, which realistically should probably be 25 at least a game. Like you said, you're able to control the clock a little, and then because I mean, everybody who watches football understands that Kirk Cousins is not a quarterback that's going to drop back 45, 50 times and win you a game, especially not in the playoffs in New Orleans against an underrated New Orleans defense. So yeah, I tell you what though, prior to the playoffs even beginning, I thought the Saints were going to win the Super Bowl. I thought this was Drew's year.
You and many others.
Yeah. I mean, you got an all-pro receiver who just broke the receptions record. You got Alvin Kamara, who was really all year was kind of quiet, he had the injury. But again, he's one of those players that he could have one game where he goes for 200 plus all-purpose yards and 2 touchdowns. Jared Cook was finally starting to come into his own. There's just a lot of bright spots to that team. And again, I think their defense was underrated, and obviously they got kind of exposed Sunday. But I just I thought that they were going to win the Super Bowl, and so a lot of credit goes out to the Vikings and Kirk for going in there and playing well and winning.
Going into a building where, I mean, people talk about home field advantages all the time. It's a different ball game playing in that building, man. I mean, you can't hear audibles. You can barely hear the headset. It's a different building when talking about, or a different animal when talking about going into that building and getting a win, much less in the playoffs. Now they got to go out west next week and do that, but we will touch on that momentarily. The final game of the weekend. Wish I didn't have to talk about it. It was, my dad kind of said it right before the game started. My dad was just like, we've had these 3 fantastic games this weekend, and I feel like this one's about, not even candidly. He said, this one's about to suck balls. And I was just like, maybe. And then as soon as I see Josh McCown trot out there, A, you feel bad for Carson Wentz, and B, you're just like, I look over at my old man, and I'm like, you jinxed us, bro.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I tell you what, I do feel bad for Carson Wentz, because I think that given his past, injury past, as well as his playoff past, not having a playoff past because, he obviously tore the ACL. And so I do feel bad for Carson Wentz. What I will say, though, is Josh McCown did not lose them that game. I don't think Josh McCown played awful. Now, do I think he played great? No. But I don't think he played awful. I don't think he lost in the game. I think their inability to score in the red zone, which, is in due part to him.
Right.
But I think their inability to score in the red zone was ultimately what kept them from winning.
Bro, that place went silent the moment Wentz went out of the game. Like, it felt like there was nobody there from the moment Wentz came out of the game.
Right, and Philadelphia is a pride-filled city, especially like that team and that franchise. Like they, so that's not normal to them. And it's also a different beast when like in past years they've had Nick Foles come in who won them a Super Bowl. When you got Josh McCown, who's what is he 40, 42 or something? I don't know how old it is, but nonetheless, people are like, oh, we're screwed. So yeah, I think the game again was kind of similar. I think both teams. I didn't think either team played really good. Obviously the Seattle's has got some difficulties in the backfield with Sean Penny and Chris Carson out, but I think that the emergence of DK Metcalf and then obviously Russell Wilson being Russell Wilson, they were able to go in there and get a win.
Russell Wilson being Russell Wilson. That it seems like he's gonna have to be that to go into Green Bay and win next week. And it's really not like there's that much disparagement between the Seahawks and the Eagles. However, it's another tough place to win. It's another tough place to go in and get a win. We'll kind of touch on the games at the end of this podcast, but what do you think on the surface of Seattle going into Green Bay?
I kind of go back and forth with this one because, obviously both quarterbacks have been to Super Bowls, have, played very well through their years in the NFL. But to be quite honest with you, I really think that the Seahawks will win. I'll tell you why. I think Seattle will go in there and win because I think Russell Wilson, first of all, obviously that team rides with Russell Wilson and dies with Russell Wilson. And so I expect him to play well, but I think the Packers have been inconsistent all year. I think the games that they've played great in, they beat good teams and that obviously helped their resume and it reflected the record as well. But I think the games that they played okay in, it was good enough to win because they were playing, a team that was acceptable to play like. So I think it's their time. I think having the week off, they might come out to a slow start, and ultimately, I think Russell Wilson takes the game over, and I think they will win.
Seems likely, at least on the scratching of the surface of it. However, we move on. It was a very incredible weekend of games. Hopefully, the divisional round will be of the same stature. However, other big news came into the NFL's news cycle yesterday when okay, so I'm now, here we go. I am now going to attempt to say Tua Tagovailoa's full name. All right. So I'm stalling as much as I can right now with my words that are coming out of my mouth, as you can hear, because I'm trying to figure this out in my head. All right, here we go. Tuanigamanauolipiloa. Like that. Like, look at this dude's name. Like, yeah. if you can see it on this screen, look at this dude's full name.
Yeah, zero chance I even try that.
Absurd. Tagovailoa is how you say his last name, though, and that's a good way to kind of redeem myself. Regardless, he's going to the NFL, and regardless of how you say his first or last name, there are going to be a lot of teams that don't really care because what's going to sell tickets and what's going to sell jerseys is just the name Tua. And at the end of the day, the injury is going to kind of cast a shadow on Tua's draft stock that is going to really make for one of the more interesting and exciting wild cards going into the NFL draft. Your thoughts when you heard him say that he's headed to the league? It
was kind of expected, to be quite honest with you. I I know they came out. I know when he first got injured. Well, first of all, the injury itself happening was super unfortunate, especially in the way it happened and the situation that happened. But nonetheless, it happened. And I know when it did happen, there was a huge kind of phenomenon that he was not going to be the same, and it was the same as the injury of Bo Jackson and this and that and that and this. And then I think I don't remember who I got the information from. There was a source that kind of shut that down quick and was like, hey, this is a totally different injury. It was caught right when it happened, and he's expected to make a full recovery. So I expected him to enter the league. Do I think his draft stock should be, kind of questioned or fluctuate, I guess? No, I still think I think he will come back. I think he'll recover fine. I think he'll be, I think he'll have that kind of a chip on his shoulder. He'll have something to prove, as if he already didn't. But no, I don't think his draft stock will be super affected. But I will tell you this though, before I give it back to you, I think that whoever does get him, I mean, obviously given the situation, system does matter in that NFL, but I think whoever gets him is going to be very pleasantly surprised, because I think he's going to, obviously there's questions to every quarterback, but I think ultimately, I think he will be a good quarterback in the NFL.
I think he'll be fantastic in the NFL. And to be honest with you, even though everyone will rank Burrow higher, and I love Burrow and a lot more than I did at the start of last year, from what I've seen on film and from like the evaluation I've had on both guys, I think if I'm the Bengals GM, I'm pounding the table and trying my hardest to convince management to take Tua instead. And that's not a knock on Burrow so much as it is faith in Tua's ability, regardless of, maybe not regardless of durability, because I mean, to win in this league in a year in, year out basis and to move on in the playoffs, as Carson Wentz could tell you, you got to be on the field to do so. And at the end of the day, when Tua has been on the field, there's a reason that only one quarterback in the history of Alabama has been taken in the first round, and he's going to be the first quarterback taken in the first round from Alabama in almost 40 years. No, more than 40 years, like 44, 45 years. And it's not the style of football they play where you have a gunslinger as accurate and as stocky in frame as Tua is. He looks like a left-handed Drew Brees to me. Like he really does. And Mel Kiper has kind of said the same thing. I think he hits the head on the nail with that comparison.
Yeah. No. Yeah. That's actually a good comparison. Now that you say that, it makes sense. I like the bold kind of suggestion, if you will. For the Bengals. I think Joe Burrow is. I tell you what I think about Joe. I think obviously Joe Burrow's a good quarterback. I mean, that's obvious. What I will say is I think Joe Burrow's. This is very specific, but I think his pocket awareness and his ability to move in the pocket is unbelievable.
It's unreal.
Unreal. I think. In fact, I think I saw you tweet about it or something during. I don't know if it was during the game against Oklahoma or.
It probably wasn't not in the game against Oklahoma.
Yeah. I know. I can imagine you're probably upset.
I didn't say a word.
Yeah, but even like, and I'm sure that you can kind of attest to this. Even as like an Oklahoma fan, like you've got to be sitting there watching, like, like this kid is good. Like the way he
cuss on my podcast, by the way. Bro.
I wasn't sure, but
man.
But no, yeah. I sometimes sometimes I watch college players and I'm like, oh, how will he translate to the NFL? And especially the quarterback position, because it's so tough. You never really know. I mean, obviously there's a history of quarterbacks that get drafted early and end up being nothing, and then vice versa. There's guys that get drafted late and end up being good. So that's a tough position to kind of scout and see whether or not you think it'll translate. But what I do think Joe Burrow has that is elite going in is his ability to move in the pocket and his awareness in the pocket.
You hear it all the time. Feel the pocket, don't like you feel the pressure. Don't watch the pressure. Like if you can feel the pressure coming around you and develop the ability to maneuver either in and around or around and out of the pocket. It's such an incredible tool. And I think that's a big part as to how Burrow got as good as he did. But, we could talk about these quarterbacks in this class all day. The bottom line about Tua is this. The wild card, unless you get one of those teams, I don't see this happening because of the fact that unless maybe with Detroit, if they feel like they can lock up Darius Slay, if they feel like he's not going to hold out and don't need to take a Jeff Okudah, or they like where they're at with Trey Flowers and don't need to take a Derek Brown, because one's going to be Burrow, two's going to be Chase Young. You give me a pen, a pencil, and Sharpie. I'd write that down in Sharpie every time. Those are going to be the first two. I think what happens with Detroit will largely impact what goes, because at 4, the Giants, I believe, are either going to take a tackle or a pass rusher. And then at 5, this is unless someone convinces Detroit or New York to allow them to trade up, because I would imagine the only reason that would happen is if someone wants Tua. Because Tua is very liable to go at 5 to Miami.
Yeah.
If Miami decide now that's the wild card, because if there's always every single year in the draft, there's always one pick where everyone looks at it and goes, okay, what happens right there is going to be a big domino effect as to what's going to happen the rest of the way.
Yep.
That's the pick right there, because they could go tackle. I mean, really, they could go anywhere on the board. They could go Jerry Jeudy, for Christ's sake. I mean, it doesn't. Yeah. They could go a lot of ways. If they don't take Tua, though, what, in your very early opinion, what makes sense for Tua?
Well, kind of touching a point. I think, like you said, there's always that pick in the draft that kind of, people look at like, this could really affect the draft later. And that reminds me of last year being Daniel Jones. Like, I don't think people thought Daniel Jones would go that early. And then to go on and to move on to Miami, one of my good friends is actually a really big Miami fan. And he was when Daniel Jones got picked, and then the Dolphins came up, and I believe they drafted Christian Wilkins, I believe. And what I'm saying is they left Dwayne Haskins on the table. And a lot of Miami fans were pissed about it, because, now they're stuck with Ryan Fitzpatrick, Ryan Fitzpatrick is Ryan Fitzpatrick. Like, you kind of know what you're going to get out of him. And then obviously Josh Rosen too. But for me, I think if you're the Dolphins, you have to take Tua. And I'm going to tell you why. I think obviously his ability, I think he's going to be really good in the NFL. But I think there's also this connotation attached to Tua that, like you said, it sells tickets. It brings an energy. Like, Miami's not been they haven't been a playoff. I mean, they make playoffs in 16 or 17 or something like that. And then they had Matt Moore, and they actually ended up playing the Steelers. But, before that, like, they haven't been very good in the past. And I think it's because of the quarterback position. And you're starting to see in the NFL, if you don't have a good quarterback, you're not going to win games. You're not going to make the playoffs. And ultimately that trickles down to your fans and your franchise. And honestly, I think they have a good young coach.
Love Flores.
Yeah, you and I both. And so I think that obviously, like, you can go through all the teams and say, oh, well, he'd fit here great. But realistically, I think Miami is a great fit for him. And if not Miami, man, I don't know. I really do not know. Maybe the Chargers, but I don't think he'll fall that low.
Well, the Chargers pick right behind him.
Oh, they do pick 6. You're right.
Yeah,
You're right.
The Chargers. I was just about to say the Chargers make a lot of sense, because if the Dolphins don't go that route and the Chargers choose not to go, because I was going to say this earlier, I think the most likely scenario in which Tom Brady leaves New England is he's going to the Chargers. Think about it.
100%,
And you could put Tua or Tom Brady into this categorization. All right. Tua and Tom Brady would do what? They would sell tickets. They would sell jerseys. They would put butts in the seats. Period.
Yep.
And going into a year where now you're not playing in front of 12,000 in a former MLS flagship stadium. You're moving to what is now like going to be known as the marvel of modern day and gladiator type NFL stadiums that is going to be holding 100K. You gotta put people in the seats, period. And Tom Brady and Tua would both do that immediately. Here's my last interesting thing. A team that I think, and I have tweeted this as well, a team that I think could be in play, the Indianapolis Colts.
Yeah. No, I don't think that's far-fetched at all. And the reason why is because I think, again, this specific point might be a little far-fetched. I think the Colts are very traditional in the way that they work. They and again, this might be a little biased, but this reminds me, their organization, reminds me a lot of the Steelers. They don't play the games like they're like, hey, listen, we're gonna bring people in if you don't produce. So if you don't produce, we'll bring somebody in. And I'm not saying Jacoby Brissett had a terrible year, but bringing a young guy in might, light a fire on him. Hey, I got to play better. Yeah. So, I don't think the Colts is super far fetched. I think that's a very likely option.
We shall see. It will be interesting going into this entire process. I mean, and even sitting right behind the Chargers at 6 or the Panthers at 7, and you could argue they need a quarterback as well. I would imagine Herbert, if Tua goes that early, I'd imagine Herbert would go amongst those 3 picks as well. It will be very interesting. Couple of head coaching hires made today in the NFL, and while a lot of people assumed that Mr. Matt Rule himself would be headed to New York, he didn't even make it to the interview before the Carolina Panthers decided to give him a 7-year, $70 million deal. Your response to that?
I tell you what, I actually love it. And well, first off, I was a little surprised that he didn't give the Giants a little more thought, and the reason why is because I believe he's from New York.
Yeah, and he was an assistant offensive line coach for the Giants in 2012.
Right. Yeah, and so I believe, like I said, I believe he's from New York. So, given that, I was a little surprised, but I'm gonna tell you why I love the hire for Carolina because, I talked a little bit about it with one of my friends. The Carolina Panthers, Ron Rivera is a great coach in my opinion. I think his time with the Panthers was just up. I think that given the situation that they were in, I just think his time was up. I think bringing in somebody new of his caliber is going to benefit them a lot. I think he's kind of going to bring a new energy, if you will, to that Carolina team. Now, obviously, they still have some questions to get answered. That defense is not great, and obviously the quarterback issue. But nonetheless, I still love the hire, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like the hire a lot. Obviously, being from Big 12 country, I got a large amount of respect for Matt Rule. It seems like this is one of those situations where, with all, I felt like it was a slam dunk for him to go to the Giants, and now, kind of looking at it in retrospect, I'm sure that potentially he thought so as well. But maybe there was some sort of behind the scenes like, well, if you don't take the job, like we might move on to somebody else. And I mean, here's what a lot of people aren't talking about. This Matt Rule goes from Temple to the fourth or fifth, I can't remember exactly, 4th or 5th highest paid coach in the NFL in a matter of 4 years.
Yeah.
That is pretty crazy to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I agree. like I said, I just think even when you watch Baylor this year, I think you see a team that I think I remember him saying when they played the bowl game when they like 3 or 4 years ago, some of the guys that were seniors this year were on that. They were freshmen on that defense, and they won like one game or something like that. Like, so when you can kind of build stuff like that, I know it's a different level, and there's a lot of factors that get played in, but I just think if you can get somebody that can get your team to buy into what you want to do, that's the biggest step. So,
Absolutely.
that's why I like him a lot.
Absolutely. And speaking of the Giants, Dave Gettleman's got this weird kind of fetish, I believe, with trying to look like the smartest guy in the room. Daniel Jones, I mean, sure, man. And I never hated the Daniel Jones pick, but I thought, that was a very I want to be the smartest guy in the room type pick. Seems like they did that again today, hiring Joe Judge, the wide receiver coach for the New England Patriots, as head coach. Was your response to that? I'll be honest with you, man. We're sitting here talking about the NFL over the airwaves, and I'm going to be completely honest with you. Was your response just like mine, which was at first, who the hell is Joe Judge?
Nailed it. I never heard of this guy. So I had to do my due diligence and kind of figure out who this guy was. Now, obviously, coming from an organization like the Patriots, and then you kind of, like I said, start to do your research, and you hear Bill Belichick have good things to say. So my initial thoughts are, well, like you said, who the hell is this guy? For one, but then you got to kind of, for me, it was like, all right, let me take a step back and let me look at this objectively. Truthfully, I think I don't want to say that it's going to be a good hire, but I'm not ready to say that it's going to be a terrible hire. And let me tell you why. I think anytime you go from being anytime you're dealing with a guy that deals with special teams, and as we know, the Patriots special teams has been good for years.
Ever since it feels like I was born.
Yeah, absolutely. They've always won the special teams game and virtually every game they played. Excuse me. And so, with that being said, anytime you're dealing with a special teams coordinator, you're dealing with all 53 guys that are on your team. You're not dealing with, virtually all 53. You're not dealing with, offense coordinator. You're dealing with straight offense, defensive. You're straight. So you're dealing with all types of guys. So anytime you can get somebody that is able to coordinate that big of a unit, if you will, I think that that in and of itself gives you, points to some benefits that could come from this hire.
No, big time. And, this is, like I said, it just feels like a very smartest guy in the room type of move, to kind of go so far off the board. And, here they are now with Joe Judge, and the NFC East goes from Peterson and then plus Garrett, Shermer, and Gruden to Peterson plus McCarthy, Matt Rule. No, not Matt Rule. Joe Judge and Ron Rivera. A completely different look. And I was so under the assumption he was going to New York that I just put him there in that little sequence. Regardless, there is now one head coaching vacancy yet to be filled. Of course, it is held by none other than the Cleveland Browns, who also, of course, do not have a general manager. And, of course, will wait to hire said general manager until after they hire the head coach. Yeah, what say you about that entire dumpster fire?
Man, I tell you what, well, again, you really got it, especially for a guy like me, like that's a Steelers fan. I can't stand the Browns. I never liked the Browns, and I've continued to hate the Browns. But you have to kind of view this objectively again, and to be honest with you, I think that they have some options. I think that they, at this point, they're the only team that doesn't have a head coach. Like they can pick who they want. Now, obviously, there's some vacancies that got filled that they, like, do I think if Ron Rivera went to the Cleveland Browns that he would have been great? Absolutely, because I think he would have got guys, to buy into his system. And I also want to touch on this point really quick. I think anytime you're dealing with guys like Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry and Baker Mayfield and guys that are young, talented guys, you know, especially like Odell, like this is a guy that has all the talent in the world, and he's, obviously struggled in different, he's dealt with some injuries, and he's struggled with, being a teammate and so on and so forth. But some of those guys, they're human beings too. They want their head coach to have a relationship with them off the field too. And I think guys like Ron Rivera, Matt Rule, like these guys are the people that do that. And so do I think a guy like Ron Rivera would have been good fit for like a team like the Browns? Absolutely. Now that's not even, possible now. But I think that the Browns, if they make the right selection, which God knows if they will, could potentially get a much better coach than what they've had in the past.
Yeah, I heard they're getting ready to go higher. You got to look up this guy named, I think his name is like Kenny Wilkins or something. He's his head coach. He's his high school head coach down in Arkansas that never punts, never kicks extra points, always goes for two, like always goes for it on fourth down. And he's won like 5 state titles.
Like, what is he, like analytics based or like what, like, or he's just that's his?
I don't know, man. My dad told me about him a couple weeks ago, and I looked him up. I can't remember his name entirely, but if you just look up Arkansas coach that doesn't punt, you'll find you'll find him for sure.
Yeah.
Maybe they go out and hire that guy. But at the end of the day, I think Stefanski has had a lot of momentum going into this. Kevin Stefanski being the offensive coordinator of the Minnesota Vikings. Maybe Josh McDaniels. And here's another thing, a big topic that's kind of come about today, and Stephen A. Smith had, kind of like a brain hemorrhage about it this morning on First Take, and maybe rightfully so. The Rooney Rule not really working in a lot of senses. You obviously have to count Ron Rivera as a minority head coaching candidate. However, unless the Browns hire Eric Bieniemy, the offense coordinator for the Kansas City Chiefs, we will go into next season with only 4 minority head coaching positions filled. And I really tried to not invoke like racial conversations and political debates and things like that on this podcast. However, this is something that directly involves with the NFL. Like, do you see maybe the changes forthcoming to how they do things? I mean, you look at the Cowboys, they interviewed Marvin Lewis, boom, requirement filled. Interview Mike McCarthy, got their guy. It's kind of BS, but what say you?
I'm a little indifferent on the situation. I think in a lot of situations, and again, like the problem with this whole theory is that any team can justify picking a non-minority coach over a minority coach easily. You can justify it in virtually any way by using X, Y, and Z. So I don't ever think that I who knows if it'll ever really be something that's super prevalent in coaching and hiring coaches and filling coaching vacancies. Do I think that there's been times where, it's a little bit easier to say, following a season where a team might hire a coach and you're like, what in the world? Like, but at the end of the day, I think there's been times where teams have hired coaches that are non-minorities and passed on minority coaches, and everybody in the world knows that the minority coach was a much better coach. And again, but any organization can justify it the other way, because they would be like, oh, hey, this coach was, to us, he was a better fit because of X, Y, and Z. So my thoughts on it are a little indifferent in that way, because I just think that it's hard to kind of enforce, if you will.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that maybe not so much the fact that there needs to be a lot of enforcement, but the fact that maybe those with hiring power maybe
Yeah.
should, you know, reapply whatever their priorities would be as front office members. However, as I said, I didn't want to spend too much time on that. We'll go rapid fire here quickly, and then we'll go ahead and get out of here. We got we'll go ahead and go rapid fire here. Head coach of the New York or of the Cleveland Browns. I personally believe, with the hunch that they're going to bring in Stefanski. Uh, I could be completely wrong. Who do you think they're going to hire?
McDaniels. I think they'll get Josh McDaniels. I think Josh McDaniels has this personality about him that's very, hey, I know what I'm doing. You're going to listen to me. Like, I've coached and I've been successful in this league for a while. And I honestly potentially think it could benefit the Browns a lot. So I think McDaniels.
That would have been my second choice. If say like Stefanski got, decided to stay in Minnesota or whatever. We'll go rapid fire for these games next weekend. You like on Saturday, I'm trying to remember the Minnesota Vikings and my San Francisco 49ers on Saturday. I believe by putting them in context of my San Francisco 49ers, that makes it obvious who's going to be my selection. What say you?
I also believe the 49ers will win. I think the 49ers, I think their defense is – I think that they are going to game plan around Dalvin Cook, and I think that as much success as Kirk had in the first round of the playoffs, I don't think they're sold. And so I think that they go into this game saying, hey, if we lose, it's going to be because Kirk Cousins has an unbelievable game. And so for that reason, and I don't think he will, so for that reason, I think the 49ers will win.
We got – I'm trying to remember what's the Saturday AFC game is Baltimore and Tennessee. I think we both kind of touched on that. We both think Tennessee will cover, but Baltimore wins. And speaking of the spread, Kansas City minus 10 against Houston. That feels crazy to me. I think Kansas City wins the game. I don't think they win it by 2 touchdowns though.
Yeah, I agree. I think Kansas City wins as well. I know Houston beat them in the regular season, and I think that was a little fluky. Not to take anything away from Houston, I just think it was a little fluky. I think, Kansas City was still kind of work out some kinks, within their team, especially their offense. But they're rolling right now. It's hard to bet against Pat Mahomes. That man is on a different level. Not that Deshaun Watson's also not very good, but I just think with those weapons, and not to overlook their defense. Their defense is playing well right now. So for that reason, I think that the Chiefs will win. But I do agree. I don't think they'll win by more than 10.
Last but not least, Green Bay and Seattle. I believe you already said you believe Seattle is going to win the game. I think Seattle covers the number, which is +4. However, I believe Green Bay will squeak it out at home. I think Seattle's just a little bit depleted. We can say what we want all day about Marshawn Lynch, and it's great for him to be back. He and Travis Homer combined for 19 carries on Sunday for 27 yards. That's not going to get the job done. It's not going to get the job done. So I like Green Bay.
Yeah. I also think that won't get it done. I think that they will rush for more yards. I think that somehow, some way, they will find a way to get some big runs. But I expect a huge day out of Tyler Lockett. I think Tyler Lockett, because again, as we both know, I think Tyler Lockett is kind of hit or miss guy. He's their wide receiver 1, but if he goes anywhere else, he's probably a wide receiver 2. But a very good wide receiver 2. He's the guy that can go for 9 catches for 180 yards and 2 touchdowns. And so, with that being said, I think he has a huge day. I think that Russell Wilson also has a huge day, and they go into the win.
Hails to the yeah. Hails to the yeah. It has been fantastic to be over the airwaves today. And we're going to be doing this a lot more often, more so probably about once every couple weeks. I know I'm going to be on here a lot over the next few months, talking obviously a lot of fighting, as well as the NFL draft. That will be coming up here soon. I will be posting and doing a YouTube kind of special solo style the week in between the NFC and AFC championship games and the Pro Bowl. I'm going to be doing my mock on here, so that will be awesome. But other than that, Mr. Sanders, thank you for joining me today, my man.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. It's a pleasure.
Yes, sir, my man. And so anybody listening out here right now, you can get this podcast anywhere your podcast needs could be desired. Go on to betmma.tips/DaveBakeMMA if you want my pick on Connor and Cowboy next weekend. Outside of that, we will see you on the next rendition of this program. Signing off. Thank you for listening.